The following production is brought to you by the Talkin' Buds Leaf Show.
Talkin' Buds Leaf Show. We have an awesome show for you today. We have the one and only Mr. Nick Richard from the Lamenting Leafs Podcast and the LeafsNation.com, and we do a deep dive into the Leafs prospect pool. We got a link below to his Twitter account where he's got this awesome chart where he ranks the Leaf prospects top to bottom. It's amazing. This is exactly what we were hoping for. This is a bit off the beaten path for you and me, but man, is it good.
No, I thought it was necessary because we've been talking about trade deadlines and trading guys off the roster and Matthew Knies. And as much as all of us want to consider ourselves Leaf fans, we're always kind of just a little bit ignorant to the prospect system. Like, we only know the top guys. So just getting this list that Nick has on his Twitter and speaking to him about guys in the organization, I thought it was needed for us and some of the fan base to really understand what we're dealing with here in terms of their prospect pool.
Absolutely. So let's not waste time. Let's get to it. It's a long conversation. It's a great conversation. Mr. Nick Richard, joining us now, writer for the Leafs Nation and co-host of the Lamenting Leafs Podcast and a great Twitter follow, Mr. Nick Richard. Nick, welcome to the Talkin' Buds Leaf Show, my friend.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, first things first, pinned right at the top of your Twitter account is this awesome mid-season ranking of the Leafs top prospects. Wondering if you could take us through this and just give us a high-level overview of what you used to put this together, because it's really impressive.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. A lot of it is just going back the last couple of years. I was working with DobberProspects.com as part of their draft scouting team. So a little bit of inherent knowledge or inherent opinions, at least, that came from my work there. But I've always kind of been more focused on the Leafs system in particular. Being a Leafs fan, as I'm sure you guys understand, you're always looking for that next guy that's coming, or that next potential piece that's going to help put this team over the hump. So yeah, a lot of it has just been watching as much of these players as I can over the last few years, and following what they're doing when I'm not able to watch. So again, the list is strictly my own opinions and shouldn't be taken as gospel by any means, but I think that with the amount of time that I've put into following these players over the last few years, I would like to think I've got a pretty good handle on where the Leafs system is at.
And following you on Twitter, you do follow these guys avidly. You're always tweeting about the depth in the Marlies and posting video clips and like really, really great analysis. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, is because, we're pretty high level. Like, we consider ourselves like just your casual everyday fan that just love to come on here and rant and rave about the team. And there's tons of talk right now heading into the deadline about like, what are they going to do? Who can they pick up? How can they bolster this roster to get over the hump of the first round? And there's lots of talk about, like I said, who can they bring in? But it's like, wait, what do they have in the cupboard? Like, what can they give up? And obviously, the first player that comes to mind is Matthew Knies. Who's someone on this depth chart that you don't think gets enough love, that we don't talk about enough?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, really emerging lately is probably Nikita Grabyankin, but he's a little bit farther down the list. So, in terms of maybe some of the higher end prospects who aren't getting really enough attention this year, I've been really impressed with what Fraser Minton has been doing out in Kamloops this year, especially when Logan Stankoven and Caden Bankier were off representing Canada at the World Juniors. I think Minton was, tasked with a little bit more of the offensive load there for the Blazers, and he really stepped up. He had an incredibly hot stretch near the end of December going into January. He's kind of cooled off a little bit since, as the Blazers have, they've made some significant additions to their lineup that's kind of thrown things into, I don't want to say disarray, but they're still trying to figure out, their best lineup construction moving forward. So Minton, among others, have been kind of shuffled around there a little bit. But I think that he's a really quality NHL prospect, and he's kind of similar to Knies in the sense that he represents a bit of a unique asset in the Leafs prospect pool. A big-bodied center who can play a strong two-way game. He's got really good offensive instincts and an incredible wrist shot. I know there's been some consternation about his level of production that's taken place on the power play this year as opposed to even strength. But in the last couple of weeks, he's really started to pick it up at even strength as well. And I just think that, he projects pretty clearly to the NHL with his size and two-way game and just his overall intelligence. The Leafs raved about it after the draft, kind of talking about how they believe his upside is very high as a player who hasn't been playing high level competitive hockey for all that long. He's also one of the youngest players in the 2022 class. So I think he's a player who we're going to see kind of climbing the boards of public perception over the next little while.
Yeah, I think when you really look at this list, and I really don't want to be that old guy Leaf fan, but any guy that has a 6 in front of their height is just is intriguing. Like I really don't want to be that guy, but when you're talking about a guy who's 6'2" and probably hasn't fully grown into his body yet, like that's very exciting for me.
Yeah, and you just look at the overall prospect pool. If there was an area where they're lacking that depth or that projectability, I'd say it's probably down the middle as much as anything.
Yeah, without question. So Kyle Dubas spoke yesterday and basically came out and said, we're not going to move off a Knies or a first round pick for a rental, which to me makes sense. Is the hype around Knies legit? Like when as someone who watches him and like is probably has a way more in-depth knowledge of him than the average fan, the hype around this kid is crazy. And I know like when you're in this fan base, it's like we tend to overvalue like our prospects or whatever, but
we all do. Every fan base does that.
Yes. But like in your opinion, like is it legit?
This is funny because it's something I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Kyle Cushman,
Yes.
fellow Leafs prospect writer on Twitter, former colleague of mine at the Leafs Nation, good friend of mine. Last year when Knies was really starting to break out and kind of make a name for himself and push himself up the prospect depth charts, so to speak, Kyle and I were kind of joking about how the hype was starting to get a little bit out of control, but it was also Kyle and I who were kind of fueling that hype as much as anybody by constantly posting the highlights and the reviews of his play. I think the hype has gotten a little bit too much. I think anyone expecting him to come and step into this Leafs lineup.
Yeah, he's the savior, man. He's the savior.
Yeah.
We're going to plug him in with Tavares and Nylander. We're off to the races. Or Tavares and Marner. We're off to the races.
Yeah, and that's, you're already kind of setting yourself up for disappointment there, I think.
Yeah.
That's not to say that he isn't a quality prospect who has no chance of being a top 6 contributor, but expecting that out of him, at the end of this season when, depending on how far the Gophers go in the Frozen Four, and, we don't know for sure if Knies is going to sign. He kind of indicated over the last few days that he's leaning that way to turning pro and joining the Leafs later this year. But depending on how far Minnesota goes, he could be joining the Leafs lineup with, 2 or 3 games left in the regular season. So it isn't really a lot of runway for the Leafs to even get a look at him to be comfortable enough to, throw him into that playoff lineup. He's still a very high level prospect who is going to be an important piece of this lineup for years to come. I just don't know if projecting him to step in and be an immediate contributor in the top 6 or projecting him to be a perennial 35 goal scorer is realistic. I think, eventually he's going to settle in as kind of, someone who can bang in 20, 25 goals a year, might hit 30 once or twice, but it's everything else that comes along with his game that is going to make him such an important piece for this team. He's just such a unique player, not only to the Leafs, but there's not a lot of players like Matthew Knies around the NHL anymore. He's an insanely physical player, and not just delivering those big hits on the forecheck and things like that. It's the puck protection, the way that he's able to make plays coming off the wall, the way that he creates space going to the middle for his line mates and just battling for space around the net. And he has all the requisite offensive skills to make good on those opportunities with the hands in tight, an outstanding wrist shot. It's just there's not a lot of holes in his game, and I think he's even kind of rounded that out further this year with more duties on the penalty kill for the Gophers. He's still helping to drive that top line, whereas last year he was the freshman on that unit. This year he's the one who's kind of got the experience leading the way with Logan Cooley and Jimmy Snuggerud, who are having outstanding seasons in their own right. But yeah, I think that if you're going to be making a deal that involves sending Matthew Knies out the door, you better be damn sure that you're getting an impactful piece who's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, there's just no way there's a rental that's worth that to me.
No.
There's no way.
And if he is going to join them later this year, I do think, just sort of throwing him in there, like out of the frying pan into the fire, might not necessarily be the worst thing. I think back to Nick Robertson in the bubble, and he just went out there and played, and he played really well because he kind of didn't know any better, and he wasn't in his head, and he was just out there like that was some of the best he's played since he's been up with the big team. And I wonder if maybe throwing him in at the end of the year, he doesn't really have time to really sit and think, oh, geez, this is a lot. Like I'm in the pros now. I'm with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's just like, no, go out there and play hockey. Like no matter what line you end up on, and it's on Keefe and Dubas to protect him and to sort of like cool the expectations around the fan base. But if he does lean that way and he does join the team towards the end of the year, just throw him out there, let him play, and just let him do his thing. And I honestly don't think that'd be the worst thing for him.
Yeah, I fully believe that Matthew Knies could step in on the fourth line tonight and hold his head above water at the very least. It's more about expecting too much out of him too soon,
right?
And not really having the runway to secure the faith of the coaching staff for when the games really start to matter. That's not to say that he couldn't make a strong impression in a handful of games and, earn a look in the playoff lineup. I just think he's going to be in tough to do so. And then it will also be tough for the Leafs to kind of take that leap in such a crucial year.
So you just kind of touched on this, but I did have it on my list of things I wanted to ask you. So if you were to move off him, because it doesn't seem like Kyle Dubas wants to. I really got that impression from listening to him talk yesterday. He was like, it would be a huge mistake to move off this kid. So safe to say, barring some sort of like epic deal that comes your way, which let's be honest, it's probably not going to happen. Moving off this kid, in your opinion, would be a mistake.
Oh, absolutely. I think of all the names that are rumored, the only one who I would even consider would be Timo Meier. I think just because you're kind of getting what you're hoping Matthew Knies is in the future if you acquire Timo Meier. The only problem there is he's not your traditional rental in the sense that he's a restricted free agent at the end of the season, but he's also not someone who fits into the Leafs salary structure moving forward either. Right. So it's just even that deal would have me hesitant to include Knies. One of the biggest problems for this Leafs team over the last few years has been struggling to integrate cheap entry-level contract contributors into their group. And, finally have one knocking on the door in Matthew Knies who could legitimately step in and be an important piece for this team as soon as next year. I think you've got to be really careful dealing away assets like that. So even for Timo Meier in a short playoff run with no guarantee that you're going to be able to retain him beyond that, I'd still be really hesitant to include Knies.
Yeah, it's too bad that Knies might suffer the wrath of expectations because of what you just said. It's just we've been waiting for these entry-level players to come up, and they just haven't been coming. And if you look at Knies, it's not like he was a top 10 pick. He was picked 57th overall. So really like the expectation shouldn't be there, but he's just going to suffer from it because we just been dying. We just dying for a prospect to come up and fill in a role like that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's been so long, and I think Nick Robertson has kind of struggled with that a little bit as well. Um, it, too much too soon, maybe for Robertson. Coming off the heels of that explosive year in the OHL, and then being brought in with the bubble. It's just everything's been so out of sorts for Robertson. With his development over the last few years, he's missed out on a lot of development time, not only because of injuries, but the whole pandemic schedule and everything that went along with that. It, Last year should have been Nick Robertson's first year of professional hockey under normal
Yes.
circumstances.
Yes.
And while he also missed significant time with an injury last year, when he was healthy, he was dominant at the AHL level. He scored at a 40 goal pace as a 20-year-old in the American Hockey League. So like that's nothing to sneeze at. And I think he's also been kind of a victim of expectation, as you mentioned with Knies there. Just coming in and people expecting him to be a 40 goal scorer right away, it's just not feasible. And I think we've seen some of the growth in his game, over the different times that he's been called up and gotten that opportunity with the Leafs. It's just such a bummer to see the kid go down with another serious injury and have another season derailed in such an important year for his development. And it seemed like he was finally starting to break through and he was getting consistent opportunity at the NHL level. I felt like he was probably owed more production than what he had before getting hurt.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were disappointed with his performance outside of that first game against Dallas, where he was the story of that game.
Yeah.
I thought he did a lot of good things, and it seemed like a matter of time before the pucks were going to start finding twine for him again. And it just sucks, man, that he's going to have to face another hurdle and kind of a long road back to pushing for a job with the Leafs.
Do you worry about the injuries with him? Like he
Yeah.
seems like one of those guys who he just has a really hard time staying healthy. And one of the things that Ryan has talked about with him on this pod is you watch him play, and I do think he needs to make some adjustments to his game a little bit in the sense that he puts himself in situations where like he's gotten rocked like a few times, and I do think that's just part of his like maturation process and growth is just learning like Marner, for instance, never puts himself in those situations. And I'm not saying Robertson is going to become like a Marner, but it's just that sort of like awareness out there that I still think he needs to learn a little bit. Because there's a couple times when he was up this year where it was like, oh my God, he just got rocked.
Well, I feel bad for him because people are expecting, because the Leafs already have so many skilled players who aren't exactly like physical types, and he kind of fits into that mold. So I felt like almost he was feeling pressure to get in on the forecheck hard and finish his checks, and he got caught in a bad spot and just got rocked.
You know what it is? I don't think anyone's ever told Nick Robertson that he's not 6 feet tall. Like
Yeah.
that guy just plays balls to the wall all the
Yeah.
time. He's always been that way. I think maybe one of the biggest issues with him early on in his NHL career has been that he is playing too fast or trying to do too much on his own. He's kind of just chasing the play all over the ice. And I feel like his better performances and better, more impactful shifts started to come when he was kind of letting the game come to him a little bit more rather than just constantly hunting the puck and chasing it around like a pack of novices.
Yeah.
He was, hunting for that space in the offensive zone or looking for those lanes or being in a better position to support play rather than just attacking all the time. But he's just that's his mentality. He goes and gets it. He's after it all the time, and I think some of that has led to the injuries that we've seen. But some of it has just been terrible luck too.
Yeah, for sure.
The broken leg in the second game for the Marlies last season, that was just like such an awkward play. He's just going to fight for a loose puck in the corner, gets turned around funny and just kind of pushed over with his own leg underneath him. It was just a really kind of freak injury. But when these freak injuries start to become a trend, it's impossible to ignore it and not be concerned by it, especially for a player of his stature, right? And with the way he plays, I don't think that you're going to get the best of Nick Robertson if he's trying to rein it in too much, maybe a little bit, like you said, but I think you need that intensity and that drive for him to be at his best. And Yeah, it's going to be a long road back for him, but I definitely do have concern about the mounting injuries at this point in his career and just how much time it's forced him to miss.
Yeah.
Definitely rooting for him.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Couple more for you here, Nick, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we found out yesterday that Matt Murray is going to be on the shelf for, Kyle Dubas said, another couple of weeks with an ankle. It looks like they're going to be rolling with Joseph Woll behind Ilya Samsonov. The conversation around the Leafs goaltending has just been a crazy one. You know, we started the season being like, oh my God, what a roll of the dice this is with Murray and Samsonov, to, hey, this is pretty good. These two guys are playing pretty well. Matt Murray, having him on your team, it's par for the course. You're going to have multiple stretches throughout the year where he's not available to you. We've seen Källgren. Now we'll probably get a look at Woll. Are you confident with Woll behind Samsonov? Like, do you think this conversation around the sudden depth of the Leafs goaltending is legit?
In what sense? Like they should be addressing the depth?
No. Like, I think a lot of people
Or
are
that
like,
they
oh,
actually
Joseph
have
Woll.
depth,
Yeah, that Joseph Woll is pretty good. And like, he can fill in here. And like, we don't need to necessarily worry about this if Matt Murray is going to not be available for long stretches at a time.
Well, I think that's just kind of representative of, goaltending as a whole, right? It's so volatile. And like, if you had asked me that same question a couple of months ago before Joseph Woll was back playing with the Marlies, maybe we aren't feeling so good about the depth in the crease. Källgren did an admirable job when called upon. I think, he was actually probably better than he was given credit for by a lot of people earlier on this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Murray injury is almost a bit of a blessing in disguise, in the sense that it's going to allow them this stretch of time to get a real look at Joseph Woll against NHL competition again. He had that, what was it, 4-game stint last year, where I thought he played pretty well in those 4 games. Pretty good showing for a netminder's first taste of the NHL, at least. But what he's been doing for the Marlies this year, since he returned from an injury that he was dealing with over the offseason, or multiple injuries actually, but that almost makes it more impressive that he's come back from dealing with multiple ailments and played the way he has. I think he's finally starting to kind of tap into that potential that the Leafs were so high on when they selected him way back in 2016. That this guy was picked in the 3rd round the same year that the Leafs drafted Matthews. And we all know that goaltenders take a long time, and it certainly isn't linear, and it hasn't been with Joseph Woll, but he has shown, steps or signs of improvement in each of his professional seasons, and it's really kind of taken off with his play this year. I think his record is 12-1-0 or 13-1-0 at this point. He's got a .930 save percentage. Went 11 games before suffering a loss with the Marlies, set the franchise record for consecutive wins by a netminder. So it's just, there's no better time to kind of get a look at him against NHL shooters again and really see what that depth looks like. How confident can you be going into the postseason if you are forced to call upon Joseph Woll or, even Erik Källgren again? But I think this stretch will be what determines which one of them it is who is third in line should the need arise. But I'm really excited to see Joseph Woll get another look. I think that, he's continued to mature and round out his game. I think from a technical standpoint, he's what you look for in an NHL netminder. He's got the physical makeup. He's got the again, I'm no goaltending expert. I think it's a very difficult position to evaluate. But you look at the way that he kind of squares up to shooters, the way that he takes away so much of the bottom part of the net, and he's got the athleticism to recover and make kind of out of the box saves when his technique isn't enough to put him in position to make that stop. So yeah, again, just really looking forward to seeing what he's able to do with this next run of play with the Leafs here.
Yeah, he went. Yeah, I know he came up. He went 3-1 with a .911 save. I thought he did a pretty good job when he came up in the past. And I look at that list on your Twitter, and I look at I see 3 goaltenders on here, and just I was just thinking about a question to ask you about them. But again, it's just, how much can you really know about these guys? It's always been a Leafs fans' fantasy to have like
a homegrown goaltender.
Yeah, the Vasilevsky, and I just look at these 3 kids on here, and like the one guy's 6. They have 2 6'6" goalies, which is nice, but again, it's like it's hard to really project where these guys are gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, again, goaltending is so volatile. We see it even in the NHL year over year, right? Like a guy who might have been a 920 last year could come in and be a 902 this year, and it's really difficult to kind of project what you're going to get out of anyone who's not named Andre Vasilevsky or Igor Shesterkin or Connor Hellebuck. There's just not many of them, right? So you never really know what you're getting from year to year. But with the goaltenders that the Leafs have in their pipeline, I think my overarching takeaway is that you at least have to be pleased with the early returns on what they've done since being selected. And I think that's as much as you can really hope for, especially with the goaltending position. Dennis Hildeby's kind of had a bit of an up and down year in the SHL, really struggled to steal playing time away from Matt Tompkins, Canadian Olympian. But when he has played, outside these last couple starts for him, he's been really strong, and his numbers have stayed solid going all the way back to last year when he got his first taste of SHL action. So you look at a guy like that who's playing in one of the better professional leagues in the world, who is 6'6", 230 some pounds, and has the athleticism to make some highlight reel stops every now and then. That's an intriguing asset to have in your organization. And I think the reason that he landed the top spot in terms of netminders on my list was all of that. The fact that he's 6'6", he's already having success in one of the best pro leagues in the world, just kind of gives him the edge over Akhtiamov or Peksa or even Petruzzelli for me at this point. I know Petruzzelli's had his moments in the American League. Akhtiamov has been otherworldly in the second tier Russian league this year, like absolutely ridiculous. I think he's rocking a 944 save percentage at this point through like 40 games or something. So like, again, you just have to be encouraged with the early returns and hope that they're able to kind of sustain that level of play as they continue their progression. Now, Akhtiamov putting up a 940 in the VHL is no guarantee of NHL success by any means, but it's certainly better than the alternative.
Yes, it's highly encouraging.
Yeah.
Last one for you. So we've had a lot of people on our pod so far this season, and I've asked every single one of them this question. One of the things that has intrigued me the most, because I'm active in the Leaf discourse on Twitter, as are you, is the conversation around Kyle Dubas. And they're playing with fire by not re-signing this guy. And they need to re-sign him now, but then you have the other segment of the fan base that is like, nope, I need to see some results in April, and if I don't see those, then that's it. You've had your chance. You only get so many kicks at the can, yada, yada, yada. I think for us as a podcast, we've always been, I would consider us like a pro Dubas pod, but I think, just after what has happened the last couple of years, it kind of wears you down. And so I think we started the year as like, yeah, I get it. They want to see some results in April. I get why they're doing this. But as the season has gone on, I think the two of us have really come around and been like, no, re-sign this guy now. Like anything that, first of all, who else are you going to bring in? I'm petrified by some of the names that would float around. Like I said, if you could say, hey, we're going to cut a deal with Julian Breezewald to leave Tampa and come here, okay, I'll entertain that. But outside of that, I'm really like, no, I don't like any of these options. Where do you stand on this? Are you like, sign them now, you're playing with fire, or are you, I get what they're doing, let's wait and see what happens?
Well, much like you guys, I would consider myself in the pro Dubas camp for the most part. I mean, I've been critical of a few things he's done here and there, but for the most part, I've been a big fan of his body of work since he's been named GM of the Leafs. I think, what's his line? Trust the process. I think that should be making its way up the organizational ladder when it comes to the decision on his future, right? If you look at the process and the way that he has shaped this team and the moves that he's made, just kind of removing the results from that, which is difficult to do in such a results-based business. But if you just look at the moves that he's made and the decisions that he's made to form this roster and what they have, in terms of future assets and stuff like that. Like you, who are you going to bring in that you trust to do a better job? I think at some point the players have to get this done, right? Like, is there anyone who is unsatisfied with the lineup that Kyle Dubas has put together? We're usually filled with optimism and everything going into the playoffs, looking at this roster, thinking every year we do this to ourselves. This is the year we're finally gonna. So you're kind of going back and doing the whole hindsight thing. If afterwards you're saying, oh well, it's Dubas's fault that they didn't have this or they didn't have that. Like, if you were confident in the group that he put together, which I have been almost every year, because you look at the moves that he makes, that they're not done without purpose. It's like he's had a lot of bad luck, right? Like, Nick
Yes.
Foligno was an absolutely perfect fit for what this Leafs team needed in that bubble season. He was just damaged goods upon arrival.
Yep.
And I don't know how you're supposed to fault Kyle Dubas for that.
Or the fact that there's a pandemic with a flat cap.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's chief among the bad luck that Kyle Dubas has had, and also like having the 3 superstar restricted free agents who kind of reset the market for restricted free agency, all while expecting that growth in the cap to come that never came. Never mind, drafting a player in the first round a couple years ago who is, no longer really an asset to this team in Rodion Amirov. The chief concern with Amirov is his overall health and hoping that he's able to just continue to live a happy and healthy life at some point.
Yep.
Never mind what he's going to be able to do for the Maple Leafs, but that's still a tough blow to this organization, no matter how you slice it, right? Obviously, that's very insignificant in the scope of things. The priority is just hoping that Amirov is able to make it through this and live a happy life. But that is a tough blow to this organization, and I just think a lot of things have gone poorly for Kyle Dubas despite his best efforts. And I'm still in the camp where he's the guy that I trust to lead this team, and I don't think that he's going to kind of mortgage the future just because he's in the final year of his deal. And I also don't think that he would be in the final year of his deal if the organization wasn't so concerned about just public perception. I think that they fully believe he is the man to build this team and lead them going forward. But the noise in this market, if they had just handed over a contract extension last year, you can imagine what the narratives would have been all this season. But yeah, if it's me, I want him signed and continuing to lead this team.
100% agree. Do you buy in? I see some people who are like, oh, they're running a risk of, them having a successful showing in the playoffs and then him just turning and sort of flipping them the bird and saying, I'm out of here. And I just don't buy into that, man. No. Like, the guy's got the primo job in all of the National Hockey League. He's put his heart and soul into this team. You're the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What? You're going to go be the general manager of, I don't know, pick a team. Nashville? Like, no. Like,
so
he's
he
not
finally,
doing it.
he say hypothetically, he finally sees his team have a bit of playoff success. They go and they win 2 rounds, and say they lose in the conference final or something like that. The mood around this organization is vastly different if that happens, right? So you think that, not you specifically, but people in general, you think that Kyle Dubas is going to finally see this group that he has slaved over for the last few years, trying to put together a championship caliber team, and he finally sees them break through and have some postseason success. And just because he didn't have the extension in place before that, he's going to walk away and take on a new project and not see this one through. I just don't see that as a realistic possibility.
100% agree with you. Nick, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys. I had a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again sometime.
You can follow Nick on Twitter at _Nick Richard. You can read his awesome work at theleafsnation.com, and you can hear him on the Lamenting Leafs podcast. So check all those out. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, boys. Cheers.
See you, man. Wasn't that awesome?
I don't know if I loved you considering me a pro Dubas guy.
Okay. Well,
You kind of lumped me in there, and I was like, you know what? I don't know if I would call myself a pro Dubas guy.
you're not an anti-Dubas guy.
No, I'm not an anti. I've liked some stuff he's done. I haven't liked some stuff he's done, but I'm kind of in the middle of him. Just like maybe if this doesn't work out, he has to be fired. I thought Nick made a ton of great points about how unlucky he's been, and it kind of swayed me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but I don't know if I'd be totally pro Dubas.
We're back from the All-Star break. Leafs back in action, so we'll be back on our regular schedule. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below.
Spread the word. Tell your friends.
We really appreciate it. We'll catch you guys next time.